Philip from Babs Honda Repair. Thanks for tuning in for another video. Today, we've got the 2003 Honda Civic back in the shop. I posted a video of me removing the transmission. The customer brought me a replacement transmission yesterday. So now we're gonna get that stuck back in. Stay tuned and let's get this installed. So as you can see, they messed up the pipes. They still got some of the old harness on here. So we're gonna get it cleaned up real quick. Alright, so here we have our transmission that's ready to go in. Well, not quite ready to go in. Still got to replace the torque converter switch because you can see they broke the connector off of it. So we'll replace this. The rest of the solenoids look pretty good. Still got the connectors on them. This sensor's good. They did break the little holder for the range selector, but it's not going to affect it. It'll still plug up. So now we got to put our starter on, our pipes, and torque converter switch. Good torque converter switch from the original transmission. Alright, then we gotta put the pipes on here. I have no idea why they took this crap off or use it for a lifting point or anything. There's no sense in all that. So if you have to swap your pipes out, make sure that the long one that goes to the back goes on the bottom, and then the short one goes on the top. Bracket here, and we need a 17 to zip these down. Make sure you put, if you have to switch these out, make sure you put your crush washer on top and bottom. Without that, you're gonna leak. Always start stuff like this by hand too. All right, so those look good. Now let's put the starter on. Slides in here. And as you can see, it's just two 14mm bolts. One right here, and then there's one right over here. Alright, and then now we've got to put our front mount back on. This is the front mount. It's got two 17mm bolts. Now, the next thing we're going to look at before we get ready to stick it up in the car is, see these alignment dowels? This one still has both of them on it. So before we go sticking it up in the car, we need to make sure that the alignment dowels aren't in the motor, because if they are, it's not going to work. Alright, so we can see that there's one alignment dowel there on the front side of the engine, but no alignment dowel on the back. So the reason that would be an issue is those alignment dowels will hit each other and it wouldn't let the transmission mate up. So what we're going to do is remove the alignment dowel from the front side of the transmission. So this is the front side. So we're going to remove this one right here. So the easy way to do that is just use a pair of pliers. You can just grab it, and a lot of times they'll just turn right out. Sometimes they become a little more involved to where they want to crush down. So what you can do is, if you're having issues with it not wanting to come out, alright, so say if that alignment dowel is stuck in there and you can't just take your pliers and slide it out. You know, if you can't do this, take you a standard 17mm head bolt like you would use that mates the engine to the transmission. Stick it in there, alright? And then get some vice grips and get the head of it right there on the, alright, and you just wiggle it back and forth until it comes out. So what the bolt does, it keeps you from crushing this sleeve because it gives it something to bite to in there. Alright, so that's your handy tip from Babs Honda Repair today. Alright, so now we've got our transmission prepped. We've got our starter back on it. We've got the pipes, the fluid pipes replaced. We made sure the alignment dowels were correct. We made sure that all the sensors that were broken were replaced, such as the torque converter switch. Yours may have other switches or solenoids that are broken. Make sure you switch those over from your old transmission before you turn your old transmission in for a core. That way you're not going out and buying unnecessary stuff. Now we're going to get the transmission up on the floor jack and get it ready to slide up under the car. Alright, so now we're just getting a couple bolts started. Now we got a couple bolts started. Lift it up into the mount here. So you can see the bolts came through here, and then we'll just start our nuts on both of them. Alright, so now we've got our nuts started here. We can use our 17mm and run those two down. And then we'll finish putting these bell housing bolts in. So there's a bell housing bolt right down here, 17mm. And then we'll tighten up the one that's right here. All right. And if you want to, you can take a ratchet or another style impact or something and snug those down a little more if you feel that what I did is not sufficient. All right, so now that we got the transmission bell housing bolts in and the mount on, we can start buttoning up the wiring up here. So we'll hook up our torque converter switch first. All right, and we'll put our little wires back on here. All these little 10mm we took off before. Our ground strap. Our chassis ground. And then our starter signal wire. It's just a little blade, it just slides down on there. So make sure you get it on there good. Alright. And then our starter wire with the 12mm nut. So we got the 12mm on here. Alright, put our little boot back on there. Put our speed sensor on. Clip our wires back into where they were clipped in before. Hooking up our countershaft speed sensor back here. There's a little 10mm bolt back here that we gotta tighten back up. Hook our range selector switch back up. Alright. And then we're back on the front side. And here's our harness. It hooks up to the solenoids. Bracketry for the wires. We'll hook up our main shaft speed sensor. Shift solenoid. Linear solenoids. I like to do them from the bottom. Here we can see these are the linear solenoids. Make sure you connect them correctly. The bottom one's brown, the top one's black. You can see the connectors are brown and black. So make sure the brown goes to the brown and the black goes to the black. Just like that. Now we're gonna hook back up our transmission lines. Get our spring clips back on there. Alright, so from this point I think that everything's done on the top. So we're going to lift the car back up and start reassembling the bottom side. I haven't reinstalled the airbox yet because I've got to fill the transmission up with transmission fluid, and it's easier to get to with the airbox out. So we're not going to install that yet. Alright, so before we put the subframe back on, I'm going to go ahead and put our torque converter bolts back in. So it'll be the 8-10 mil bolts that go around and hold the flex plate to the torque converter. The little short ones like this. So you can spin the torque converter by hand to line up the bolt hole. Get a couple of them started. Alright, so we're going to put our 19 millimeter up on our crankshaft and spin it counterclockwise and reinstall the rest of the bolts. Alright, so we got all the torque converter bolts installed. Now we'll put our dust cover on. It's just the 110 in the back. The rest of them are going to be held on by other stuff. So now at this point, we'll get our subframe and sit up under the car, and then set the car down, and we'll get the subframe installed. So I just kind of got it set under the car there, and now we'll set the car down. So what we're going to do next, we're going to lift it up on this side here, back in this shock, and then we'll put a bolt through it here. So I just got one of the bolts. And you can see I got that top bolt in. So now we can go to the other side and do the same. So now we're on the driver's side. I don't know, we're just going to use one of these. They're not the right bolt for it, but we got to take it back out in a minute anyway. Alright, so now that we got that in there, we'll pick the car back up and finish mounting the subframe from the bottom. Alright, so as you can see, the subframe's just hanging on those 2 bolts that I put in up top. So what we're going to make sure we're doing here is we're going to make sure that this T-bracket in the back clears the block. But we've got to put our 4 bolts in each corner. Alright, so we'll start with our 17 mil in the back. We got all 4 of our 17 millimeters and the corners started. They're already tight, they ain't just started. Now what we can do is take these bolts back out because they're no longer holding the subframe up. Then we'll put these 14 millimeter bolts back in on each side. Now we got to get our bolts back in the back here. Bell housing bolt and the upper mount. Those 4 are started. I'm going to use our 17 millimeter impact. And we'll do our front mount. This is a 17 millimeter bolt too. There's a nut on the back side. You have to make sure it lines up. Alright, so now we're going to concentrate on getting our shift cable reinstalled. So it's going to go in here like so. This bolt here is this one that has the little keepers on it. All right, and it has a big tab. See the big tab? So the big tab faces towards the back. There we go. Got it started. That's a 10mm. And we'll use our flathead to bend down the little tabs. Those just make sure that the bolt doesn't back out. Alright, so now we got to secure the cable to the transmission. These little bolts here, alright, 2 of them. And they're also 10mm. Top and bottom. Alright, so now we got the shift cable on. So now we're going to put our other little brackets on. So alright, so we'll do the 14s first. We'll do the 12s. I'm going to put this little bracket on. 10 mils. You notice I'm not over tightening those with my electric impact. So if you're using electric impact, don't run them down super tight because you'll wind up stripping them or breaking them. So all I do with the 10 mils is just snug them down. Again, I don't hammer on them. 14s and 12s, they can take a little more abuse, but the 10 mils will snap, especially if you got a good quality impact. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is install our axle. Remember, the long one goes on the driver's side, the short one goes on the passenger side. So we can see it seated there. Now we'll put it in the hub. Alright, so we got that through. I'm going to start our axle nut. Alright. Both of our bolts in up here. And we'll put our nuts on here. And we'll use our impact to tighten it. It's 19 on this side. 22 on this side. Alright, and we can go ahead and tighten up our axle nut. It's 32. Again, it's 32mm. And reinstall our caliper. And those are 12. Alright, and then we'll reinstall our ABS sensor. It's 2 10mm. This side is done. All we gotta do now is put the wheel back on. Alright, so now we're completely done with the driver's side. We'll repeat the process on the passenger side. Alright guys, so now we've got everything buttoned up as far as the axles and the wheels go. So now all we gotta do is put the exhaust on. Make sure you put your donut gasket in. You don't want it to sound like a log truck. We got our spring bolts. Get that one started. We'll start the other one. Alright, so we got both of those started, so we'll use a 12mm, run those down real quick. Alright, so we got our 12 here. We'll just run them, tighten them down. Ain't gotta be super tight, just snug them down. Put our hanger back on, exhaust back on back here. 3 14mm nuts. Now we'll hook our O2 sensors back up. Like that one. And we got our front one here. Got it back into the bracket. We'll actually connect the wire up top. Now we got everything buttoned up. We're gonna pull the transmission drain plug just to make sure the transmission is empty because I don't want to leave old fluid in there. And we use our 3/8 ratchet. Just a little plug right here on the side. We got our drain pan down here on the floor. If it has fluid in it, it's gonna make a mess if you don't have a drain pan. So it has some fluid in it there. We'll let that drain out for a minute. It don't have to be super empty. So once it starts slowing down here a little bit, we'll go ahead and put the drain plug back in it. Alright, so while we got the drain plug out, I like to clean off this magnet. Just use a towel or whatnot and just wipe it off. Alright, so you can see the fluid slow down coming out. So we can stick our drain plug back in there, tighten it back by hand until it gets snug, and then we'll use our 3/8 ratchet and tighten it down. Ensures that we have fresh fluid in the transmission. But yeah, that's everything on the bottom, guys. Everything down here is done. Now we can lift the lift down and finish everything else from the top. We're almost there, guys. Almost there. Alright, so now we've got it lowered back down. So back to that O2 sensor. See, right here is the plug. Clips on this little bracket here. Like so. And then this one connects into it there. Alright. So all that's done. Unfortunately, I have to go inside and get ready to go to work because this isn't my actual job. I do have an actual job. We'll finish this up tomorrow. All we got left to do is installing the battery, putting in the transmission fluid, starting it up, putting it all through the gears, check the transmission fluid again and make sure that it's full. And then once the transmission fluid is full, we'll reinstall the airbox and then hopefully it'll be ready to go. We'll pick it up tomorrow. So that's the next day. We're back out here in the shop. We've got the 03 Civic back here. And today we're going to put the battery in, we'll fill it up with fluid, and then we'll start it, put it through all the gears, check the fluid again. Once I ensure that the transmission's full, I'll reinstall the airbox. So let's get back to it. So this car actually has the actual factory battery tray, as well as the top that covers the battery. So we put that in. We have our battery. We have our cover. So if you have the cover, make sure that the big hole is towards the back of the car. And then we got our battery tie down. Still got the J-bolt on there. I don't loosen the J-bolt. So hook the J-bolt first. And then it's our 10mm. Battery was a little low, so we'll put the charger on it for a minute. Alright, so before we start it, we're going to top it off with transmission fluid. And about the only transmission fluid I recommend is genuine Honda DW1 transmission fluid for automatic. A little expensive, good stuff. And the way I fill it up with fluid is I remove the dipstick, and then I use a funnel, such as this, and I put it in the dipstick hole, and fill it up. Now we'll remove the funnel, take our dipstick and check the fluid and make sure it's full. It's still not even touching the dipstick, so we'll add more fluid. Alright, another thing about Hondas, you only check the transmission fluid with the car turned off. I know a lot of other cars, the domestics, you know, Ford, GM, those kind of things, you check with the car running. Always do a Honda with the car turned off. Alright, so the transmission appears to be full on fluid right now. Put the dipstick back in, and we're going to try to start it up. Alright, so it's started up. So now we're going to lift it up just a little bit to where the tires aren't touching the ground and put it through all the gears. Alright, so we'll put it in reverse, give it a little throttle, go to neutral, go to drive, let it shift through the gears. Alright, push the brake, put it in 3, push the brake, put it in 2, push the brake, back in reverse for a second, push the brake, and put it in park. Alright, so now that we cycled it, I'm going to check the fluid and make sure it's still topped off. Most of the time it's just like that, empty. So we'll put a little more fluid in it. Alright, so after filling it for the second time, see the fluid is still full. I've already put it through the gears. So now we're ready to reinstall the airbox. But first, I don't know if y'all guys have this problem, but my dipstick feels pretty loose in the hole. It wobbles around, it's not tight anymore. So, the solution I have found for that is I use some Scotch 3M 33 tape. Go right around this, about 2 laps. And that should tighten it up. And it'll hold it in there good and secure. Handy dandy tip from Bab's Honda Repair. Alright, so now that we've got our dipstick back in, all we have left to do is the airbox. Alright, so I made sure that my breather hose was secured back into it. Here is just a little rubber grommet to make sure it's pushed up in there. We have a bolt here, there's a bolt right down there, a bolt here, and a bolt right down there. And they look like these, 10 mil head. So we'll put them in there real quick. Down there's a little tricky. You may want to use a magnet to do it. Just to get it in the hole, and then you can use your impact to tighten it. Well, that concludes this job. We've got the transmission full of fluid. We've got everything secured. Airbox back on, batteries back in. So that's everything we need to do. I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you need information on how to remove the transmission, be sure to check out my transmission removal video that I made for the 01 to 05 Honda Civic. I hope this helped you. Maybe you can do this job by yourself now. If it helped you, please give me a like. Throw me a comment, let me know what you liked about the video. And if you'd like, you could subscribe for more DIY content. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Peace. Oh, it's dead.